everyone, and welcome to No Off Season. I'm Zena Cada.
I'm Chantel Jennings.
And I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And today on the show, we're asking the question, is dominance always a good thing? Can it get boring seeing the same team win over and over and over? Or does it actually bring more excitement and attention to the sport? We're going to take a look at UConn's reign over women's college basketball and debate how helpful it is, or are we tired of the same thing? But first, Caitlin Clark is taking her basketball brilliance from the court to the studio. She's going to be joining NBC Sports as a special contributor for Basketball Night in America. She's one of the most influential players of her generation. She brings elite basketball IQ, competitive insight, and undeniable star power to NBC's coverage, but we haven't actually seen her in front of the camera other than through her interviews. Now, from what I've seen in those sideline interviews, I feel like she'll be a great contributor. But you never, ever know. With Sunday Night Basketball launching across NBC, Peacock, and Telemundo on February 1st, 2026, Sabreena, Chantel, what are your thoughts on NBC bringing in an active generational player like Caitlin as a contributor?
I mean, personally, I like hearing Caitlin talk. I think she's very good with media. You know, she has to do a lot of it, admittedly. But it's been about, 6 months where we haven't heard a ton from her because she was injured. She did have her USA basketball stint, but it's been a relatively light Caitlin period, so to speak. So I think it's nice for her to be back, in front of the audience. I love when NBC does like the cross-promotional stuff when they remember that, yes, we do carry the WNBA. Like it's nice for them to acknowledge that all of these leagues are part of their program. Caitlin is obviously a fantastic basketball player, and every time she talks about the game, it's interesting. And selfishly, it's going to be launching before a Lakers game, so I'm interested to know what she says about my favorite team.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah.
I like it. Chantel, you excited about this? You looking forward to it?
Yeah, I think anytime you can get former players, and I'm not in the camp of like you have to have played the game to talk about the game as someone that, was a decent high school basketball player and still writes about and talks about the game. And I love hearing people that are much smarter than me talk about the game, but I think there's also something when you have someone who's made those passes, who's been in those huddles, or who can like question coaches' calls or like read body language in a way that's just different, that they've been there. I really, really love that. But Zena, I'm curious what you think, because you've done what she's doing, and
player
like
to broadcaster transition.
Yeah, the player to
Right.
broadcaster transition. Like, what was the hardest part? What do you feel like you've changed the most since your first game?
Sure.
Like, what can we expect?
Whew, that's a good question. One thing we can absolutely expect is way better basketball insight than anything I could provide, okay? Caitlin Clark can be able to provide some really good in time, like, insight and things that she's picking up on because she played at the high level and she's playing at the high level. So I feel like that's automatically going to be a boost for Basketball Night in America from that perspective. But the only thing I am curious about is it is different to do media, being sideline interviewed, being in front of a media scrum, answering questions one-on-one versus being on a panel, having to play off of other analysts, being able to be versatile, and also being able to be succinct. You want to talk about the hardest part? I'm a yapper. Why do you think I'm in this role? Being able to say something credible, valuable, and additional, right? Something that adds to the insight for the audience in a 60-second, 30-second snippet is really, really, really hard. And a lot of folks don't realize. I've had a lot of friends that have like come on to shows that I've been on, and they're like, holy, there's an entire episode happening in your ear. And it's like, yeah, producers are talking, there's all this sound, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, et cetera. Like there's a lot going on. And so being able to focus on that and then also say what you have to say, not feel rushed, not speak too quickly, all of these things are really important, and they have nothing to do with your basketball insight and your basketball knowledge. And so it's always, you can tell there are some folks that like have it. They have the pizzazz, they have the energy for it. And then there's some folks that just like, you clearly just know basketball, but we appreciate you being here. So I'm very curious as to what camp she's going to fall into, knowing that she's been pretty animated, I would say, and like lively in general. I feel like she's going to be great. And also this generation is way better trained than any of us were. So that's
you look at the other people on the Indiana Fever who have stepped into this space, right? Aaliyah Boston does work for NBC, like on Big Ten stuff. I think she's been very good in the studio.
Absolutely.
Stephanie White obviously been at this a lot longer, but I think one of the better broadcasters. So if there are people that, Caitlin needs to go to for advice and just a little bit of tips on how this works, I think she has a lot in her immediate corner. And then I love the fact that she's commenting on the NBA because she's not going to have to hold back at all, right? Like, it's not like you have to be diplomatic about players who you might see in a couple months on the court. Like, she can just go at it and say exactly what she's thinking. And I hope that leads itself to a more interesting conversation.
1,000%. And it can bring eyes, right, to the WNBA when the time comes. People are going to be like, whoa, I like her insight. I like how she looks at the game, how she plays the game. And hopefully, Chantel, it'll translate to folks being interested in what she has to say and what she has to do out on the court.
Well, and I think just this generation, like Sabreena mentioned, Aaliyah Boston doing work, Caitlin doing work, this group, it just feels like with more access to film recently and 15 years ago, like they didn't have iPads in everyone's locker to just constantly be watching film whenever they wanted. And so I think
we don't even have to go back that far.
But like, usually it's like, oh, you want someone to be a vet, someone who's really played in the game and like who's been around it for so long. But it's like with how much film is available and how much basketball, presumably all of these even rookies have watched at this point, it's like it doesn't have to be the system they've played in either now or in college or whatever to comment on. It's just their mind and how much film they've watched and consumed. And, because as we know from talking to a lot of college players, not all of them watched the W growing up. A lot of them do watch the NBA growing up. And so commenting on that too, I'm really excited to see how it goes and sort of how everyone plays off one another. And like you said, just from game 1 to game 3 to game 5, it's like even as a player, even as a commentator, like how they grow, how they change the approach. I'm sure she'll take it seriously. I feel like there was that clip of her and Lexi Hall where she was like commenting on baseball or something. And like, she would take that seriously. Like,
exactly. Just walking, like they were walking somewhere from like smoothies or something. I don't even remember, but it was like, it was very casual and she was taking it very seriously. That's one thing. You're right. I think you're about to say this, but Caitlin doesn't do anything lightly, it seems. So, yeah, I feel like she'll be very, very focused and very interested in growing in this space. And then speaking of growing, Philadelphia, get ready. Unrivaled is about to grow into your area. They are officially in the building. Xfinity Mobile Arena will be hosting back-to-back matchups tonight with the Breeze taking on the Phantom, tipping off at 7 p.m. Eastern, followed by the Rose facing the Lunar Owls at 8:45. Sabreena, this is a big statement, in my opinion, for Unrivaled to be in Philadelphia when we know there will soon be a WNBA team there. There's already clamoring for just having that women's basketball presence there. How big of a statement is it to you? What does it tell you about where this league is headed that they're already, quote unquote, expanding? I want to say, quote unquote, they are expanding.
They did add 2 new teams. They added a lot of players.
Yeah,
They're adding sites. Yeah. When we think about Unrivaled, we've talked about how it's changed from year 1 to year 2, like what the future of Unrivaled looks like. I think part of the appeal of Unrivaled is that it is a single site, that players don't have to travel during the offseason, that everything is taken care of under this one hub. But there are limitations to being there, right? Like they only have an arena that seats about 1,000 people. They're playing in the Philadelphia 76ers arena that seats 17,000 people, and they've sold out this night. So there clearly is a demand for people to want to watch Unrivaled. But how do you balance what Unrivaled is trying to accomplish with, growing the game and taking it on tour and making players travel and adding, wear to the part of the season when they're supposed to be nominally taking it easy. So I think it's great that they've, added this stop, that there has been so much interest in people wanting to see the product. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere in Philly. I'm interested to see what it looks like the smaller court in an NBA arena. Should be noted that Unrivaled announced this before the WNBA announced their Philadelphia expansion team. So the market has been there. But I also wonder just what it means for the league broadly, because I can't imagine that it's super helpful to have 4 or 5 of these stops every season, because it adds a lot of operational costs and, just travel wear and such. So I think it's good that this one is happening, but I would imagine this is probably going to be a relatively infrequent thing, once a season, unless they, significantly want to change the model of what this league is.
Yeah, it feels like it is a splashy event, but not necessarily something that should become a part of their operating system, just normally. Chantel, if there were other cities in future years that Unrivaled would go to, any come to mind for you? And I'm thinking there is an opportunity from a college basketball perspective going to cities that already have big college spaces or big college names, but don't necessarily have the professional presence.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sabreena mentioned it, but selling out an arena with 17,000 people, like that, I think playing the Unrivaled game, which, is the full court 3-on-3 in front of a new audience, bringing people in, making them television viewers, that's probably a part of it, but also just for the players, like the opportunity to play this game in front of 17,000 people. Like, I would bet that they will say the one flight there and the flight back is going to be worth it. It's not exactly like a WNBA travel schedule that they've got going on. It's like, just a round trip flight. So, I mean, I'm biased. They should come to Minneapolis, but who wants to come to Minneapolis in January? Probably no one who's spending their winters in Miami. But I don't think Philadelphia is super warm right now either. But I could see South Carolina being an obvious stop. Maybe they use that as a way to convince A'ja Wilson to play. Like, hey, we're going to be playing in Columbia. Like, come back to Colonial Life Arena. Like, this will be really fun. Everyone can see you play again. Or maybe, she can even like jump in for a game. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas here. I think,
I like it.
Though they want to probably keep it in warmer locations. I think LA would be really, really fun. I think, Nafisa and Stewie have been really smart about everything they've done with this. So going to Philly, a women's sports, bringing women's sports to that sports crazed city made a lot of sense. But I could also see them getting creative with it. Like, could you do this in an outdoor venue in LA? Like, could you, ahead of the LA Olympics? Like, all of those sort of things, I'm sure, are within the realm of possibilities for this league, which is obviously pushing the boundaries of what women's basketball can do.
Yeah, what they're doing from a marketing perspective, like I imagine Unrivaled doing something crazy, like playing their game on a ship, right, on the bay, somewhere, right? Like that's the kind of thing that I can see them coming up with, and then also finding like the right partner to be able to sponsor that court. And it's just like this crazy drone view of like an Unrivaled court in the ocean, and that's happening. Anywho,
those
I'm already
college
thinking
basketball
some ideas.
games on the aircraft carriers are very good visuals. Like the pictures from those games are always outstanding.
Right.
Yeah.
That's immediately what comes to mind. There was that Michigan State,
UNC.
Maybe UNC. It was UNC. Yes. Oh, that game is unbelievable. So beautiful, of aerial shots. Like, but then also from the ground looking up, these men look like giants.
They look enormous. Yeah.
They look just huge. Yeah, that would be so fire. Unrivaled, call me. We got ideas. We'll work together. Okay, up next, we're going to dive into the legacy of dominance on the basketball court, not aircraft carriers, but on the court by UConn. Don't go anywhere. So when you talk about women's college basketball, one name always comes up: UConn. For decades, the Huskies have set the gold standard, winning national championships, racking up win streaks, and producing some of the best players the game has ever seen. From Geno Auriemma's legendary coaching to stars like Taurasi, Breanna Stewart, Paige Bueckers, don't know if you've heard of them. UConn hasn't just won, they have dominated. Watching UConn play isn't just seeing a team win, it's witnessing excellence on display year after year after year. So Chantel, before we dive into whether UConn's dominance has been good or not so great for women's basketball, can you give our listeners who may not be familiar a quick overview of how that dominance came to be?
Yeah, Geno Auriemma took over the UConn program nearly 4 decades ago. And it was, when he was on campus to, figure out if he was going to take the job or not, he didn't even see the basketball arena. And then kind of after he was offered the job was like, oh, yeah, didn't see that. Early years, he and Chris Daly literally taught a gym class in which they required students to come to the games to sort of build this fan base. Rebecca Lobo was his first All-American he recruited, and I think she's often sort of cited as such a huge turning point for the program and helped them win their first national title. Now they have so many others, but I think you look back at it, and I think there's a lot of pieces of this program's journey that mirrors the growth of women's basketball. But it's also, it feeds each other, right? Like the way that UConn has grown and how we think about the last 40 years of women's basketball. Like, you can't untangle those two things. Like, is women's basketball where it is right now without the last 40 years of UConn and Geno and CD and all of these amazing players who are now littered across the WNBA and, you know, alums of the W and European basketball that, you know, we just think of when we think of women's basketball.
It's so true that when you think of a superpower, whether you're thinking about it from the world access perspective or you're thinking about it women's college basketball, when there is a Goliath, people will tool up to figure out a way to take them down. And it will impact the playing field. It will produce more stars, produce better teams, produce better investment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I like the way you put that. If not for UConn's last 40 years, would we have the other superstars, the other super teams that have been created in their wake? I feel like I'm already getting into it, Sabreena, about if it's good or bad. So let me just back up a little bit once more. When we're thinking about from Lobo to Taurasi to Stewie to Bueckers, and now Sarah Strong. I know that Bueckers era just was like right there, but still, I'm going ahead and passing it off. What would we say about the field of play from back then and the competition? Because the way that we look at these eras of UConn, it feels like there was always a foe that they were going up against.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I feel like we should include from Taurasi to Maya Moore to Stewie.
Yeah, I was going to say, how are we this far in and we haven't talked about Maya?
Maya.
Yeah, that's true.
My favorite player to ever watch, but yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think that's so right. It's not just that UConn has been this perennial superpower. It's that they've always had some sort of rival that's really brought the interest in that you want to see their competition between one another. They elevate the play, you know, for both programs. Like you think about UConn and Tennessee was so instrumental to the early growth of women's basketball. And I say early as if it like didn't start many, many years ago, but like within the 90s, I think UConn and Tennessee and then the early 2000s, that was a huge part of it. You know, they met in the national championship game multiple times and Pat Summitt and Geno Auriemma were the biggest faces in the sport. And then you think about UConn and Stanford, right? Like Stanford's the one that ends UConn's 100 or 90 plus game winning streak when they had the back-to-back titles and they didn't end up winning a national championship there, but they had the multiple clashes in the tournament. Then you have like UConn versus Notre Dame and Geno versus Muffet McGraw and all of these coaches who sort of have their head-to-head with Geno, but then the programs also have their head-to-head with one another. And now we're in the UConn versus South Carolina era, I think. And all of these different foes make UConn more interesting because it's not just UConn reigning over everyone. It's, there's actually like a challenger has entered, you know, the field of battle and they're trying to make this more difficult. And I think that's a big part of it. It's not just that UConn can like exist independently as the lone superpower. It's that someone is always building up to meet them at that level. And that to me is what makes things really interesting is when you have a credible rival that, you know, challenges that dominance, right?
Yeah, it brings eyeballs. People will tune in to see Goliath fall. And if you have someone that is a capable David, you want to see what's going to happen. How good, how close can they get even? It's always going to be interesting to watch something like that. It also is important to note just the dominance that we're talking about, right? Like in the 90s, won 2 titles, but reached the semifinals 3 times outside of those titles, right? Like that was where it really started. You're talking about Rebecca Lobo. And on that note, just thinking about Rebecca Lobo being the face of that UConn growth and then being the face of like the WNBA's growth is a wild thing. I don't know.
She's a real seminal figure in women's basketball history. Just how long she's been associated with it.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. But there have been 10 undefeated teams in women's college basketball history, and 6 of them were UConn teams. So let's go back to our original question. And I'm going to set up some context here before we ask officially. This year, this team, who is still undefeated, they're at 21-0 or 22-0?
22-0 after beating Xavier the other night.
That's right. Thank you. They are 22-0. They are averaging the most points per game in this season since their 1999-2000 season. okay, they're right around 89.9 at the time that I'm recording this. In that year, the 99-2000 season, they won a title and they went 36-1. That one loss came at the hands of Stanford earlier in the year. At 51 points allowed by their opponent, that is the lowest allowed since the 2015-2016 season, which was their last undefeated season, where they went 38-0 and won a title.
Their fourth in a row, we should mention.
Their fourth in a row. Thank you. Very important.
Stewie's fourth.
2013.
Stewie's 4 for 4, and Morgan Tuck, and
exactly. That 38.9 point differential is also it's the highest differential that they've had since the 2015-2016 season. Now, it's not the highest point differential margin of this year. LSU is ahead of them. But when you look at all the years of women's basketball in terms of when this point differential started being tracked, dating back to 2009, UConn holds 4 of the top 5 point margins in that time period. And they hold 7 of the top 8. I say that to say they aren't just beating teams, y'all. They're whooping tails. Like, they are putting belt to butt. Okay? And they have been doing
Zena.
it. It's not the expression, but I think kids are listening. I want to be respectful and mindful to the children that might be listening on their way to school. Okay? Y'all know what the saying is. So, in the top 3-point margins, LSU is number 1 right now. Number 2 is UConn, but back in 2014-15. And then they're number 3. This is since 2009, okay? Just to contextualize what this team is doing. They have the highest points per game, highest field goal percentage, highest assists per game, and the highest offensive rating since that 2015-2016 year. They're different. They're very, very good. And I feel like they're different than previous UConn teams. But the question is UConn's dominance good or not so good for women's basketball? Sabreena, I'm going to start with you.
Right. So I was starting to look at just some TV ratings for national title games to see like how people tune in for these big games. And before this last 3 years when, the title game moved to network television on ABC versus like cable television on ESPN, the highest number actually came in a UConn-Oklahoma game during Suber's last season in college. That was their title game. And then the second highest one is UConn-Tennessee from 2004, which would have been Diana Taurasi's last game. So when there are like credible rivals for UConn, which I never thought I'd put Oklahoma in that discussion, but there they are. Even UConn-South Carolina was a pretty highly rated title game in 2022. People tune in for those. It's when, you mentioned those ridiculously dominant UConn teams, like the 2015-16 team, the 2014-15 team, part of that 4-year run of national titles, that the interest dips a little bit. Like one of the lowest rated title games of the last 25 years was UConn-Syracuse in 2016, which you would imagine would be like hugely popular. This completed the 4-peat, right? Something that's probably never going to be accomplished again. And yet it's the 3rd lowest rated title game of this century. So I think that there are levels to this, right? Like people want to see UConn be good because dominance, I think, really plays, right? We've talked about this in other sports. Like I think the Aces being good for the WNBA, like having a dynasty obviously brings in people. I think, the Kansas City Chiefs having a mini dynasty in the NFL brings in people, or, in the NBA, right? Like the Golden State Warriors having a dynasty brought in a huge generation of fans there. I think that only works in women's college basketball if there is a rival to, like, people don't want to watch UConn beat up on a random team. They want to see something historical at play. They want to see like a UConn Notre Dame or a UConn Tennessee or like South Carolina, right? Those big names. So it's not that UConn's individual dominance, I think, is good or bad. It's like, is somebody meeting the challenge of UConn in that particular season? Because we know that there's that constant with UConn. It's just who is going to pop up to actually make things interesting in that particular year.
I agree. And Chantel, I really do feel like if there's not a credible foe, you're now looking at it as, oh, I already know who's going to win. I don't want to tune in, and I don't need to tune in. And as much as we love watching Maya Moore and Stewie and Paige Bueckers and these stars that we've seen over the years, is that enough for it to be a good thing that they are so dominant that is the product? Not necessarily someone challenging them, but them just being excellent. What are your thoughts? Good or not so good?
I'm thinking back to a press conference that Diana Taurasi had in Paris before the 2024 Summer Games. And someone asked her about her age. And she said, only is this much experience considered a bad thing. Like, only in women's sports would me being, 40 and being in my sixth Olympics be somehow a detriment to Team USA. And I think, we had a meeting. We knew we were going to talk about this. I've been thinking about this the last few days. And I also think that this is like the perpetual conversation in women's basketball because UConn has been the standard for so long. And so much of other teams, they arrive once they beat UConn, sort of a thing. Like, they are sort of the litmus test to a lot of other teams. And I'm not saying 100% of the time, but a lot of the times it's like, oh, this team have they replaced, UConn in that way. And I think there's also, I think of it more broadly. Like, what we're talking about is sustained greatness over several decades with several different teams playing through several eras of college basketball. And I think, is it good or bad? It's definitely the eye of the beholder. But like, you've got to respect it. And so much of UConn, what they do is providing the context, right? Of, this team or that team or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just think of, when people find out that I write about women's basketball and they have questions for me, at some point they'll be like, oh, is this team better than UConn? And it's like, they might have not have watched a game. Is South Carolina going to beat UConn this year? Because South Carolina has become that other team that has been the recent foe for UConn. And it's like, that becomes the conversation. That becomes the context. And I just think like, all of this, the TLDR of my argument, and it's actually ironic that I'm wearing my Put Women's Sports on TV shirt today. Like,
there you go.
I'm like, are they good or bad for, is their greatness good or bad? It can be up to whomever. Yeah. We just need more women's basketball accessible on TV. Like, that's the long and short of it. I think even in the years where you had utter dominance, the 111-game win streak, like, if more of those games were on TV, that would have been a good thing overall. More women's basketball on TV is a good thing overall. It is only in the last few years that every single game of the NCAA tournament has been available across the country for everyone to see. And so it's like, at a time when women's basketball, you think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when it wasn't as accessible as it is now, and I'm still saying there's a ways to go here, right? But UConn was a sort of entry point. Like, everyone knew UConn. And I think it's also that legacy and that dominance and that Goliathness of this team. It's also something that other sports talk about, whether you can go to a U.S. women's national team game, you can go to the Lakers, you can go to whomever, and you could say, UConn level dominance, and people know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's important for women's basketball.
Growing up, did you all ever get your height measured on the door frame?
Oh, I didn't live anywhere long enough for that to happen. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Fair. So we've seen this.
I was never very tall, Zena. I was always very short. So this was not something
a short person.
We haven't talked about this on the pod. I had a big growth spurt in 7th grade, but until then I was 4'10". So this was not something I aspired to do. I avoided those things.
Good to know. Well, I mean, Sabreena, I was very similar to you, but I always wanted it. I wanted it. I saw it in movies all the time, and I wanted to be measured up against a house beam, where over the years you could see, oh, this is where I was when I was 7. This is where I was when I was 8. And Chantel, as you were talking about how UConn is kind of the measuring or the through line, right? Like the underlying thread that has been written or laid out underneath the story of women's basketball as it's come to its prominence. That's how I look at it. I feel like UConn is the doorframe that a lot of folks measure themselves up to. And if we looked at a doorframe that had little markers in it, it'd be, certain years, Tennessee would have their markers in orange, right? And then certain years, Baylor would be like, we're all the way up here. Like, we didn't even have to play you guys in the final, right? Like, there'd be so many different teams that measured themselves up against that marker. And also, this metaphor of the door frame, like, you walk through that door, that's when you can come up against UConn. And only a few teams have actually walked through the door frame. Tennessee being one of them, Stanford being another one of them, South Carolina being another one of them, and Notre Dame, right? They have consistently posed threats. But with that all said, I feel like there's only a few not so great things that we've kind of already laid out. It's not so great to bore the audience, right? It's not so great to bore an audience with dominance. And it kind of squeezes out the Cinderella stories when you're so good. Like, you feel as if, is there a mid-major that could ever like have that Cinderella moment where they beat a UConn? I think about what was that year when Harvard beat Stanford as the 16th seed in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Like,
extenuating circumstances with two of their starters out with torn ACLs.
Fair.
Tara Vanderveer would like to jump in here.
Fair. But like, even like those moments are few and far in between when you've got such a level of dominance. But where I'll cut myself off and say, well, this pool right now, I don't think is so far removed from the conversation of UConn. Yes, this UConn team is excellent and they're so different, but I still think that there is a great pool of other teams that could be squashing the Cinderella stories. I don't think it's solely UConn like it has been in years past.
I think that's kind of the point, Zena, that I was thinking about when you were talking about mid-majors. Like, I think those are two separate conversations in some ways, because it's not like, especially in the tournament, that like the mid-major is always running into UConn and then UConn crushes them. It's sort of like that's more of a women's basketball issue overall, that there still isn't enough whatever at the mid-major level for those teams to make it past the Elite Eight. That we see more often those 12-5 games on the men's side than we do on the women's side, which are often sort of the mid-level power conferences against the top-level mid-major teams that are sort of more equal in whatever. And I think part of that, too, has been that maybe some of those men's mid-major teams have different scheduling, that they have seen that kind of competition before they get to the NCAA tournament or whatever it might be, right? Like, there's a lot of ways to dissect that. But what I was thinking was really interesting was that we think to UConn's most recent national title and sort of the dominance that South Carolina has had over the sport in recent years, and sort of how the conversation of South Carolina and Dawn Staley usurping that top spot and being there, and that no one really thought about UConn as a contender or elite until they beat South Carolina last year on South Carolina's home court, and sort of how that was just, being in the arena on that day, such an interesting sort of flip of the script of, UConn had to beat South Carolina, and they were sort of in that David spot last year versus the Goliath, which is just such an interesting recent context to this conversation.
We can't forget that before last year, it had been 8 years since UConn had won a title. Like, and the thing was, they were in the conversation. Of course, they were in semifinal appearance. Like, their consistent appearances in the later rounds of the NCAA tournament, that was always there. I think that was consistently pretty much there. But it is true that UConn did need to flip the script this time on South Carolina. Sabreena, I want to get more into, like, I think there's good aspects of this that we haven't touched on yet.
I think two things can be true about UConn's dominance. One, I think it's broadly good for the sport over the last 40 years that UConn has created a level that other teams have needed to get to, right? Like UConn not being in the
Right.
title picture for the last 8 years. They made the Final Four 7 of those times when they didn't win the title, right? And how
Right.
many of those Final Fours were lost by a couple possessions here or there, you know?
Mhm.
That is the level of success that you go into UConn with, right? That like last year they won a title and was kind of a ho-hum team. And now like they have that burden off of their shoulders because they don't have to worry about bringing a title back to Storrs, right?
Right.
But then I also think that any team, and this is not just related to UConn, any team that is so far above the pack, that is so dominant in any one single season, kind of takes the shine off of the rest of the year, right? Like you mentioned all of those numbers
Yeah.
about UConn's individual dominance, and like their net rating is better than all of the recent UConn teams other than 15, 16, and 14, 15. And I talked about those numbers briefly. Like those are 2 of the 5 lowest rated title games of this century. So I think as a whole, like UConn deserves so much credit for building women's basketball to where it is now. And yet they also kind of deserve some blame for taking a bit of the air out of this season because they've been so freaking good. And like Sarah Strong's, you look at her advanced stat numbers and they're on par with like Stewie in her last season and Maya Moore in her best season. And that's before you get to the fact that they also have another player on their team who might be the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft this year. And then we haven't talked about Blanca Quinones or Ali Zebel, who just set a UConn program record with 10 3-pointers the other day. Like this roster is obscenely loaded. And I don't think it's their fault, that they're this good or that they get to like play against Big East competition for the next 2 months and just have a grand old time until everybody, comes to play in March. But I think there are competing elements here where like I don't think that this UConn team is bringing more interest into the 2025-2026 season, even if you think about since 1995, they have been so broadly beneficial for the sport.
I feel like, though, there is a ramp-up period in college basketball, whether it's the men's side or the women's side. Like, March Madness is when sort of the eyes of people who aren't consistent watchers tune into games. And so I guess we aren't there yet, so we can't say for sure. But you don't feel like the idea of chasing a back-to-back, since it hasn't been done in 8 years by UConn the last time, 2014, 15, 2015, 16. Like, you don't think that sort of the chase of glory of the two-peat, when people see this roster on the floor, you don't think that'll bring more eyes? Like, I agree. People might not be tuning in for UConn Xavier when like 6 UConn players are out. I don't blame you. I don't think any of us on the podcast watched that game either, right? Like, let's be honest. But you don't think that, I don't know. I just feel like the fact that like UConn got back last year and now it's like, oh, can they do it again? I feel like that is gonna bring eyes.
That's what I'm interested in, because I'm not sure that like
I did
the
my duty
numbers
watching
of all.
Seton Hall
Okay.
in UConn. So I did my time. Go ahead, Sabreena.
Yeah, that's why I was just looking at the TV numbers from before, and like obviously TV is not end all be all of how these things are rated. I would have expected like UConn going for a 3-peat, UConn going for a 4-peat to be massive television draws, and they just weren't, right? And the games that really drew were like, oh, because it was Sue's last game or Diana's last game, and like Paige's last game, obviously a massive event last year. I don't think AZ Bud's last game is going to be that same level. Maybe when Sarah Strong eventually hangs it up in Storrs, like that'll be a big event because she is going to be on the level of the Stewies, Paige's. Even Nafisa Collier had a fantastic UConn career that we don't really talk about because she only won the one title with Breanna Stewart. Yeah.
God. Also, did you really call a team that had AZ, Paige, and Sarah on it ho-hum?
It was kind of ho-hum during the regular season. You specifically said they weren't even in the elite conversation until they beat South Carolina.
That's true. It's just funny. Like,
it's true.
Let's save that clip, Tanika and Andy. Let's save that clip someday when they're all WNBA All-Stars. We can have Sabreena
among
say
their
who's
12
the
national titles. It's among the ho-hum of them.
I mean, I'm with you. We are clearly stuck between the two. And I want to go back to your point about like taking the shine away. That is more so what I mean by the Cinderella stories. And I don't necessarily even mean during the tournament. I mean during the year, right? Like even just Vanderbilt getting their first loss against South Carolina the other day. We don't quite get to appreciate, I feel like we're not going to quite appreciate what Vanderbilt just did, because it's like, Vanderbilt can do it, UConn's still undefeated, right? And I just feel like and I'm not saying we are doing that as people that are watching this sport and reporting on it, but the average listener or average fan or average viewer might just be like, well, you're not UConn. and you're not as good as UConn. And so you don't quite get the same level of shine and the same level of adulation as we would give a team that is ho-hum. No, I'm joking. That is just dominant and crushing teams every time they play.
Right.
But I think
that's where it does hurt them that they're in the Big East, though, right? Like, I think it does that they don't have the stretches where it's like, oh, they have Oklahoma, Texas, South Carolina 3 games in a row. Like, I think if that were the case, this conversation would look very, very different. Totally. And also their win differentials would look very different.
Might be a little different.
Right, exactly. But so what I'm hearing, and I agree with you all, like things that are good from UConn being dominant. One, it forces everybody to get into the lab, figure out your recruitment, figure out your facilities, figure out the resources that you have, figure out your coaching. Like it levels everyone up to try to beat UConn or be at that UConn standard of dominance. And I think that's awesome. It always helps when it comes to, I think, a narrative being built into the possibility of going up against UConn and possibly taking them down. I feel like those type of games do have a little bit of more juice to them. I don't know what's going to happen this year. I feel like this year is going to... Who do we think will beat UConn this year?
I think I made a prediction in our first piece at the site this year that no one will beat UConn this year.
Yeah. See? Okay. Well, there should be a little bit of excitement then in every game, every time the ball tips. Yeah. But one thing that I don't think we've alluded to, but we haven't exactly said, I personally think it's great, especially in this period of time where we're trying to get more fans of the college game to transition to the W, right? Because for a long time it was, I am a fan of this college team. And it would kind of break off.
And you're only a fan of the college team.
And you're only a fan.
Players beyond that. Yeah.
Exactly. I do like the fact that UConn plays at such a standard of excellence and such high IQ, high standard basketball, and creates these stars that we are able to follow through their college career and then want to continue to follow to the WNBA level. And because their standard of excellence is that way, other teams, have gotten to that level as well. And so I think it has raised the bar of basketball so much so that it's not just college basketball that you're liking. You're excited to see it continue into the WNBA. And you're kind of seeing a dosage, a little diluted WNBA product in these high standard games towards the end of the tournament, for example, right? Like we are watching Sarah Strong and we're not saying, oh, Sarah Strong is so good in comparison to we're comparing her to what she might do in the W. And that's cool. Like, I think that that's really cool for viewership, that fans are already thinking about what could this person's W career look like. And UConn produces a lot of those type of conversations.
I also just wonder how this conversation changes 10 years from now. Like once Geno retires, who knows exactly what UConn becomes at that point. And like hindsight is 50-50, or what is it? Hindsight's 2020, not 50-50.
Ooh, that's some good eyesight, girl. But, I don't know. Maybe it's not.
It's exactly the same as 2020. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yep. But so...
That's right.
How does it change when we get further from being in this moment? And so how will people reflect on it differently when, like Sabreena said, I don't think we're going to see a team go 4 for 4. I mean, honestly, maybe Sarah Strong can. Maybe she is that generational that she can lift up everyone around her. Again, there's a lot of really good players around her, but maybe Sarah Strong is that kind of a player. But yeah, how do we think about this era and these national championships and these players differently 10, 15 years from now when Geno's not on the sideline anymore? I assume he's going to retire by then. Who knows?
Yeah, I'd assume that too. But that all just makes me think of, Geno looking at the door frame and just tapping it twice, being very happy with all the markers that he's been able to accumulate for himself, but also what the sport has done as well in his wake. This is going to be a very interesting season to see who can actually challenge the dominance of UConn. And also, in the midst of all these eyeballs on women's basketball, how will our fans react to this. Okay. Guys, let us know. Let us know in our comments. 1, who do you think will beat UConn this year? Will it come during the regular season? Will it come during the tournament? And 2, what will happen in 10 years' time? What will the dominance look like at that point? I want to hear what you guys think. If this is good, not so good, and what will it look like in the future? All right, let's close this show out. All right, before we go, Chantel, you've got a fun game lined up for Sabreena and I think it's in perfect theme with our episode so far. Take it away.
All right, so if we had to have, UConn has the most national championships of all time, but also if we think of the person who has the most quotable quotes of all time, I think Geno Auriemma also falls within at least the top 3, and that might be a little conservative when it comes to women's basketball. And so I wanted to play a game where I will give you a quote that Geno has said about one of his players, and I did not have to go for deep cuts here. So these are all players that anyone listening that has even paid cursory attention to UConn women's basketball will know, but you guys have to guess which player he was saying this about. All right, so let's start with 1. This is talking about a player, and Geno said, "She has a way of coming into my office that I know she's only there for one reason. She wants me to tell her how great she is. I'm not kidding." He said the conversations go like this. He says, "What's up?" This person says, "Nothing, just stopping in. Are you doing all right?" "Yeah, I'm good." He asks, "Did you learn anything today?" She says, "Yep, we did." And he says, "When you play like you're capable of playing, you're the best player in the country, right? And when you don't pay attention, you stink." Who did Geno Auriemma say this about?
This feels very Diana-y, too. That's the problem. All the Diana and Paige stuff are the same.
Yeah, they're so similar. Oh, that's a good point.
We can go Paige. Yeah.
Oh, are you guys going to go for consensus?
Well, I think it's Diana.
People.
Yeah, I'll go Diana.
You pick. I'll go Paige.
Yeah.
All right. It's Maya Moore.
Oh.
You guys are
really
0 for 1. Yep.
Wow.
No.
Yep.
Well,
Maya Moore can never stink. I don't believe that.
I know. I'm like, I don't remember that ever. Okay. Cool.
Moving on.
Let's keep it going.
I love that knowing she's your favorite player, Sabreena. I was obviously going to start with the Maya one, and you didn't go for it. All right.
I think this
quote number 2.
kind of throw us off the path of smells. Yeah.
Okay. Quote number 2. "Some people like to put on this facade like I've got everything under control. Don't worry about it. Nothing bothers me. I'm immune to everything. I'm smarter than everyone else." Who did Geno say this about?
Whoa. That is a crazy quote. Some people.
There's just
I'm
too
smarter
many...
than everyone. I feel like, is that Sue? I don't have it. Who's their most poised player, I would say? And
Sue makes sense. Yeah.
Sue makes sense.
You guys got it. That one is Sue.
Yay.
You're 1 for 2.
Good. Yes. Okay.
Great. All right. We will go for the next one. Okay. This is talking about a former player who I will say this was about her, I believe, her freshman or sophomore year. By her senior year, he was much more complimentary. He said, "I've started calling this player Forrest Gump. When he talks about how you never know what you're going to get in a box of chocolates, well, I come to games saying, let's see what this player's show looks like today. And you have no idea what it's going to look like. You never know when it's going to blow up or be something completely different."
Okay. He really does say some wild stuff. What? This is hard.
Okay.
Fresh. Okay, so I know Diana was she had but we already did Diana. No, we didn't.
No, we
didn't
didn't
do
do
Diana.
Diana. Yeah.
Diana had a rough freshman year.
So did Stewie, actually. She came off the bench for most of it.
Oh, that's right. Oh. Say it one
Maya
more
was
time, Chantel.
National Freshman of the Year.
Right. Yeah. Say it one more time.
"I've started calling this player Forrest Gump. When he talks about how you never know what you're going to get in a box of chocolates. Well, I come to games saying, let's see what this player's name show looks like. And you have no idea what it's going to look like. You never know when it's going to blow up or be something completely different."
Yeah. I think it's Diana.
I'm going to go
That's my guess.
Stewie.
Gabby Williams.
Okay.
What?
A slightly deeper cut.
Yeah.
Slightly. Okay, that was a slightly deeper cut.
No,
but I was
that's
also,
fine.
as
Totally
someone that
fair.
like loves her game, both in
Yeah.
college and now, I was like,
So does Zena.
Come on.
I do. I'm a big fan. Big fan of Gabby
Yeah.
Williams. Wow.
All right, we'll do one more.
Okay.
This was
I also
Geno
find that
talking.
adorable. Sorry. I'm just thinking about little Gabby Williams to see. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. We'll do one more. This is Geno talking about a player hitting a shot in practice. He said, she's like a 12-year-old who just got a quarter at the crafts fair for doing something great. She's having fun. I said, don't ever lose that. That'll keep you going for a long time.
Hits a shot. Is that AZ Fudd?
This is so Paige. It's got to be Paige.
Oh, really?
It feels very Paige. Everything he says about Paige is, apparently not.
Is it a deep cut?
No, it's not.
I feel like I
Is
should
it
have covered my face for these. I'd be terrible at poker.
Making a shot in practice.
The whole like quarter at the fair is very like earnest to me. I almost think it's Sarah
That's
because
why I think it's. I also was thinking Sarah too.
Yeah.
AZ or Sarah, but then I was also thinking like we've seen Stewie be kind of that way, like in.
I'm gonna go Sarah
competition.
Strong.
All right, I'm gonna go AZ Fudd.
Z, you should have kept it. It's Stewie.
Oh, it
It
is
was
Stewie.
Stewie. Dang it! I was.
You're like
Oh,
so
I
close
could
every
see it.
time. And I'm like,
I know.
You got it.
I know. But I could
That's funny.
see like Stewie being
Mhm.
competitive and like silly about like, yay, I made a shot. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, can we do one more? Do we have time for one more?
yes,
but this
one
one will
more,
be
one
just
more, one more.
Okay.
And
This
then
one
we're
is
gonna
just
set
for
our screens.
Zena. Because Zena,
Okay.
I feel like you've gotten like so close all of these times. And it's like, just go with your gut. Don't listen to Sabreena. This is because this is from Sabreena and my conversation with Geno on the pod last year. But you had to miss
Oh.
that interview.
Right.
So I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
I'm hoping your memory is not amazing on this
The
one.
only thing I mainly remember about that conversation was how he was just like over the tennis ball kids, and I loved that quote. I use that quote all
that
the
was
time.
also great.
Such a great
Okay.
quote. Sorry, go ahead.
Who did he say she would have put her? This is about someone in NIL. He said she would have put herself out to the highest bidder every year. She would have played at 4 different schools, 100%. She would have been a mercenary. She would have played at UConn as a freshman and then 3 more schools, and she would have been a free agent.
Would have been. This is a.
So it's someone who played pre-NIL.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
pre
yeah,
2020. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. A mercenary is crazy. The only person that I think about when I hear mercenary is Diana Taurasi. Swin was also really savvy with the money and could have made some deals. Is it Swin?
It's
She did it again.
Diana.
I did it again. Oh my god. Okay.
Oh,
I'm
just
done.
go with your gut, Zena.
To be
I
fair,
should've gone
Geno
in.
did bring up Swin in this
He
conversation.
did talk about Swin in that conversation as well.
Oh,
That was the
okay,
second name
okay.
he brought up, but the first
Yep.
one
Was
he brought
the
up.
mercenary
Oh.
is Diana.
Mercenary. I know.
You were
Okay,
so
well,
right. Like your first instinct was right. Like
Yep.
almost every time.
Every time.
Dang it. That's all right. Well, I hope all of you that played along had a lot of fun with that. That was so good, Chantel. We're going to have to do that again I don't know if we can, I'm sure he has more quotes, but maybe next time we do some Dawn Staley quotes, we got to find some of those
Yes.
out of there. But okay, before we get out of here, got a few quick games for you guys to set your screens to. I'll start. Speaking of UConn, they're taking on Tennessee Sunday at 9 a.m. PT, 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox. What's our next game?
I'll be at Iowa UCLA, which is also on Fox. That's at 1 p.m. Pacific. Top of the Big Ten, 2 undefeated teams in conference.
Ooh, okay. Like it. And then there's an SEC battle, Chantel.
And then Oklahoma, Texas, Sunday at noon on ABC.
Boom. A lot of good basketball games coming up this weekend, and we'll see what the dominance looks like if it continues against Tennessee. All right, y'all, that is all we've got for you today. We'll be back next week with more discussions around women's hoops. You know how we do. And make sure, help us. Go fill out that survey, okay? Let us know what you and your podcast habits look like. We won't judge you. Don't worry. We actually want to hear about this. theathletic.com/survey26. Give us an opportunity to learn about that. And as a thank you, you will be entered into the raffle to win $100 at Amazon vouchers. So definitely fill out that survey. We value your feedback. We want to implement it. Let us know. And if you haven't already, do your job. Follow our show. Tell people about it, okay? And start with conversations around UConn and see if people are like, what's UConn? And then you're like, look, I got this podcast for you. They'll break it down for you. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and also wherever you listen to your pods. And head on over to our partner, the Yahoo Sports Hub, for more content, sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, Chantel Jennings, Sabreena Merchant, I am Zena Cada, thanking you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.